Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'm doing a review, a comparison of the book Deliverance by James Dickey and the movie Deliverance of the same subject and name. The book was published in 1970 and the movie came out in 1972. I've done a review of the book recently, so check that out. And I tried to avoid making comparisons in that review because I think, like a lot of people, if you've come to Deliverance, typically it's through the movie. And it's hard not to read the book without thinking of what you remember from the movie. Fortunately, I remembered very little of the movie, which I watched very late at night, and I found there's a lot more of the movie. And the movie is pretty accurate to the book. I'll go over some of the differences, but this is going to be a shorter video than I was expecting. It wasn't that shorter because there were not quite as many differences as I thought. I'm going to try to do them in order, but there's a chance that I may not. And there may be things that I will forget from the book and I think are different in the movie, and it's just because it just got by me in the book. The beginning. The beginning in the book starts out with friends, Ed, Lewis, Drew, and Bobby around a map of northern Georgia, and they are looking at the Kalawasi. They're looking at a map of a river, and they're going to go on a canoeing trip over the weekend. So that's what happens. They do that. The book is divided into 5 chapters. There's before, and then 3 days, September 14th, 15th, and 16th, and then after. And the before is this conversation. It also provides some background into the characters, who they are, where they're coming from. It's done through Ed's point of view, and it's really well done. In the movie, it starts with the cars that the 4 friends are going up to Ori to arrange for their cars to be moved down to Antry. And they're going to take the canoes that they have, 2 canoes, down the river and end up in Antry, and then the cars should be there. So what we're seeing at the beginning of the movie is just that conversation that they're having where Lewis is trying to sell this trip to his 3 friends and them responding. It's not really word for word from the book either. It's really just a pretty realistic dialogue between the characters. So you have that. That's the first difference. And I think it's okay. What we lose out of that, though, is we don't have kind of the home background, kind of driving home that these guys are just kind of working class, everyday, some of them might be white collar Americans that are looking for something to do, something to change it up for the weekend. I didn't realize this was as early in the movie as it was until I watched it. But while they're gassing up one of the cars in the book, Drew, who brought his kind of beat up Martin guitar, has his guitar, and one of the guys working at the station says, "Hey, hold on, I'm going to get this boy who's not that bright, hit bean cans in the front yard growing up and stuff, going to school. I'm going to bring him out here and you guys can play together." And the kid comes out and he is albino and has a banjo, and they play together. Drew proposes that they play Wildwood Flower, which is the song that I used at the beginning of that review and the end of that review. So they play it, and the boy picks up and plays it great. And Drew loves it, and he asks, like, "Hey, can I get this kid's address? I'd love to play with him again." It's a nice moment because it really is showing like music uniting people across the spectrum. And it's nice. In the movie, Drew is just kind of playing around with his guitar while they're waiting and gassing up and trying to arrange for somebody to take their cars. Driver Brothers. It was a Grider Brothers. They're waiting there, and Drew is just, I don't know if he's tuning his guitar or what, but he's just kind of picking it a little bit. And he notices that there's a reply to everything that he does on a banjo. And he looks up, and there's this boy who is not albino, but there is something physically wrong with him, developmentally wrong with him. I don't know what it is. Drew keeps playing, and the kid responds, and eventually they are playing a song called Dueling Banjos. Now, Dueling Banjos came out of a song called Feuding Banjos, which was played with a 5-string and a 4-string banjo. Dueling Banjos, as you typically will hear it, is a guitar and a banjo. The one that you hear in the movie is a guy named Eric Weisberg. And I've met him. He's passed on now, but really nice guy. Originally, the song was going to be played by Bill Keith, or was proposed to be played by Bill Keith, another late banjo player, another banjo great. But Bill Keith was touring in Europe, and he proposed that they use his friend Eric Weisberg, and they did. Eric Weisberg's playing the banjo part in Dueling Banjos. And I have Eric's autograph in my, which you can, I believe, find in my video about Masters of the 5-String Banjo. And actually, I had sent that to Bill Keith, the book, for him to sign, and then he had Eric Weisberg sign it. So he has assisted Eric Weisberg twice as a good buddy. You see them play Dueling Banjos, and at the end, Drew goes to shake his hand, and the kid turns his head. People come from inside the house, inside the filling station, the gas station, and they're kind of dancing and enjoying it, and so is everyone else. Like, it's an enjoyable scene, but it definitely didn't have kind of that true Crossing Borders feel to it because of the way the kid responded at the end. And I don't know why they did that, but it kind of lost it a little bit for me. Like, let them have that connection. And Drew's a good guy in the movie and in the book. So they get out there. The action between the Griner brothers is pretty accurate, although in the book, the Griner brothers propose that Lewis lead them to show them where he wants to go in, or maybe Lewis actually says he wants to. In the movie, Lewis kind of cuts in front of the 3 guys that are going to help them move the cars. So it's a little more aggressive. Bobby is a dick in the book, and he's a dick in the movie. He talks down to the people that they run into in northern Georgia, is really kind of a coward, but says some kind of asshole things. So I think that's accurate. Later on it won't be, but at this point it is. They go out on the canoeing trip. In the book, when they wake up the next morning, there's a lot of fog, and Ed's out with a bow and he takes 2 shots and he loses the arrows. So he only has 2 arrows left. In the movie, he takes a shot, but he doesn't miss because he jerked up a little too high on the bow, trying to compensate for the distance. He screws up in the movie because he's scared to kill something. I didn't get that feeling from the book. I felt like he just overcompensated for the distance or the elevation or something. I don't know. But he also loses the arrows in the book. In the movie, he just grabs the one that he shot out of the tree, and he still has it. So it's not like he's down to 1 arrow at the end when he's going after the man with the rifle. In the movie, he doesn't have an issue of having 1 shot, but in the book he does. They get going again, and they switch up who's in each canoe, and now Drew is riding with Ed, and they're a little bit ahead. They get an earlier start, and Lewis and Bobby say, don't get too far ahead. And they do. They get out a little bit far ahead, and they decide they're going to pull up and wait. And they're confronted by 2 individuals. Now, in the book, one of the individuals is supposed to be kind of fat and stupid. And the other one is stupid with missing teeth. In the movie, the first one, the one that doesn't have the rifle initially, or the shotgun initially, or maybe he does. The fat one's not fat. He's actually fairly fit. And he's the one that rapes Bobby. Now, this is one of the scenes that's disturbing in the movie and the book. But in the movie, he talks about how Bobby looks like a pig. And he wants him to squeal like a pig while he's raping him. And Bobby tries to run away, and he's getting pulled down this hill, and he's all dirty, and then he gets raped. In the book, he's not trying to get away. I mean, he'd like to. but he's raped over a log, and he screams, and that's what brings the other guys in to the action. They're on the canoe. They find the other canoe, and then they walk up, and Lewis shoots and kills the guy who had just raped Bobby. He doesn't say squeal like a pig, and he also, the other guy, as they're getting ready to also sexually assault Ed, who was tied up against a tree, he also doesn't say, you should have got a pretty mouth or something like that. That's another line that people remember from the movie. It's not in the book. In the movie, you can see Lewis right before he takes the shot. In the book, Ed's just looking, and all of a sudden there's a arrow sticking out of one of the guys. So he dies, the way you kind of expect. And they have this conversation, the four friends, about what they're going to do. The other guy that had the shotgun, he runs off. He loses the shot. Well, the guy that's holding the shotgun is the one that just got shot because he was about to get a blowjob. The other guy, I know it's confusing. I'm saying the other guy, the guy without teeth, he runs off. And they make a decision that they need to bury the guy who just got shot and killed. So they do. They bury him in a really shallow grave. I don't know if bodies, like how long it takes a body to float, but it seems shallow enough that it would not be surprising if the body floated after it was filled in by the damming of the river. So that happens. They go back out on the water, and they go through some rapids. And this is what was confusing to me. In the book, it goes into slow-mo kind of. And Ed, who's paired up with Drew's in the front of the boat, in the front of the canoe, he says that Drew's hair moves a little bit, and while he's like mid-paddle, whatever this is, paddle, he kind of lets go and rolls out of the boat. And you can kind of picture, okay, something must have happened. He's wearing his life preserver, but he falls out, and because he falls out, it rolls the canoe breaks, and they're in the water, and then the other canoe also has trouble, and they fall in the water too, and they're going through these rapids. In the movie, Drew's not wearing his life preserver, and he just kind of, it's weird, he was already acting weird because they had buried this guy, but he's acting kind of weird, and then he rolls over, and it's not clear why he rolled over. But since he was already acting weird, you're just kind of like, what's going on with Drew? I didn't feel like he was as weird in the book before he rolled. And it wasn't clear when you're watching it why he rolled, although they kind of theorized that he was shot later. But he's not wearing his PFD, his flotation device, which in the movie look really weird, and I don't think they're buoyant enough. In the book, as Ed's flowing down the river, he gets stuck. I think his leg gets stuck, or part of his body gets stuck in the rocks, and he feels like he's going to drown. He starts to get close to blacking out, and then he frees himself. And later he runs into Bobby and Lewis. Lewis is injured. He broke his leg, his femur. In the book, they specifically say it's not a compound fracture. In the movie, it is definitely a compound fracture, and it's kind of, his skin is just hanging off there like chicken meat, uncooked chicken meat. But that's one of the differences. And so they pull up, they grab the remaining dinged up metal canoe because the other one's broken, and they get out next to the gorge, and they find a place to kind of hole up while they try to help out Lewis. And there's this big discussion that goes on about how they think that Drew was shot, and that the person who shot him is probably waiting for them, and at first light, since they were all in the water, they weren't good targets, but at first light, the guy will probably come back and pick him off from above the gorge. And here you see Bobby's a coward. He was already an asshole, but he's a real coward. And Ed's kind of rough with him, and Ed says, I'm going to climb up there with my bow and the single arrow I have left that I can shoot, even though there's another one that's bent. And I'll go and take care of him. If he's up there, hopefully he's not. I don't think he will be, but if he is, then I'll kill him. And it happens like that. But In the book, he climbs up in a tree, clears out some of the pine needles, and has a direct kind of tunnel that he's looking through to this place at the top of the gorge that he thinks this guy's going to show up. And he does. And he shoots him. I feel the need to add, in the book and the movie, although I don't think I appreciated it when I was reading the book, there is some question if the guy who is shot with the arrow at the top of the gorge, there's a question if he's the same guy that was involved with the rape. And he's wearing a bridge, I guess, which they figure out. So he has a bridge which can be removed. And he doesn't have all his front teeth, but that's not necessarily unique to one person in this area. And really, neither Ed nor Bobby can totally confidently confirm that it's the right guy. And I thought that the fact that he showed up at the top of the gorge in the morning was pretty telling. And maybe it is. But later on, we find the deputy who talks about his brother-in-law who went out hunting and never came back. And you wonder, could that have been this guy? Could they be the same person? Sure, they could be, and that's what I was thinking. But even watching the movie, you look at his face and you're like, is it? I think it is, but it's not conclusive. I kind of want to go back and look at the casting and see if it is the same person that played both. I feel like I should do that. But it's never totally clear. And you could see, I guess, that first light somebody would show up and just kind of get a view. The thing is, a hunter is not going to be hunting down into the gorge. There's nothing down there to get. He's not shooting fish. So why would he be up there first light looking down instead of looking for wildlife somewhere else that he can shoot? I don't know. Maybe that's an indication that it is the right guy that was killed. I don't know. There's also one of the guys that was killed had a honorary deputy sheriff card in his pocket. And that would kind of make sense if his brother-in-law was a deputy sheriff. So just my thought. The other thing that I was thinking about for a while when I was reading it and then watching it didn't really change anything for me was, could somebody have done this to Drew? Because Drew wanted to report this. It seemed like he wanted to report that first murder, which I think was justified. And is there some way that Lewis went after him? That's a stretch. I think that's a stretch. But the fact that we never really confirmed that he got shot or how he died, how he was injured, I don't know. I don't think if you watch the movie, you wouldn't get that idea. But when you're reading the book, I think there's a little bit of not confusion. There's room to question. And that's what I ended up doing. What do you think? And he doesn't know if he killed him, but he also falls out of the tree, and he falls out of the tree. In the movie, he's on this rock that he falls asleep on, and when he wakes up, the guy's standing there looking down. So that's a little different. In the book, when he falls out of the tree, he impales himself on the other arrow that's bent and kind of broken. And the way it's in him, he can't pull it out. So he has to kind of cut up his side with his knife to pull the arrow out. In the movie, he just pulls the arrow straight out. He's injured, but it's not quite the gruesome injury that it was in the book, where he really starts to take a negative turn through the rest of the book until he gets to the hospital. It just seems like he pulls it out in the movie. And shoots the guy. They get going again. They go through some rapids. I thought the rapids were going to be worse. They find Drew's body. And Drew's body is stuck in a tree. This is in the book. They find him. He's kind of stuck in the side of this river. And Water's going in his mouth, and he may have some injury from a shot, almost like he was grazed. It looks like maybe, but his head's also badly damaged from probably hitting a rock or something, or having a bashed in. Whatever it is, he's wearing his life preserver. They pull him out. They decide that to avoid any kind of questions, they're going to have to sink him in the water. They've already done that with the guy who was shooting, or that had the rifle at the top of the gorge, and they had buried the other guy. So they've now disposed of 3 bodies. In the movie, well, in the book, they describe Drew as looking pretty relaxed, like reclined in this area that he was stuck in. In the movie, his arm is at this really weird angle over his head. I can't do it, but it was out of its socket. It looked disgusting, and he wasn't wearing his personal flotation device. So not a major difference, but later they had to explain why they had 4 PFDs, personal flotation devices, when they ended up at the end of this, when Drew was wearing it in the book. In the book, it was pretty easy to say they had an extra one, I think. But in the movie, they just said that he wasn't wearing his, he took it off. Not a huge major issue. So they're going down. It seems like in the book that Lewis is really out of it. He's completely asleep, basically, while they're looking for entry. But in the movie, he's complaining a lot about, he's crying out while they're slamming down these rapids. I pictured much bigger rapids, bigger drop-offs in the book. In the movie, at the very end, when it's really Ed getting them through it, it didn't seem as big. They're looking for a highway bridge going across the river. That's how they know they're in Antry. That's another entry in the book. In the movie, they just kind of end up next to this church, which is partially in the water or along the water, something. And they get there. Ed starts walking, and he finds somebody to call the police and for an ambulance. So that happens. It didn't feel the same for me. You have some of the same interaction, but a lot of the interaction in the movie that involves Bobby was actually all Ed in the book. So Bobby is still kind of a shit show by the end of it and is a liability. And a lot of the angst by Deputy Queen, who thinks that his brother-in-law was killed by these guys, and may have been, is directed at Ed in the book, where in the movie it's more Bobby standing up and Ed kind of backing him up. Not a huge fact, but it does, at the end of the book, you're kind of left knowing that Ed and Bobby are not going to be friends. They went through something together, but they're done. Their paths are crossed, and that's it. They're not going to come back together. Eventually, Bobby goes off to Hawaii. Ed stays where he is, has some dreams, but eventually starts to accept that the dam has filled in this area, and they've made it. The other thing I didn't get a feeling for in the book was that I didn't think that the dam had already been constructed and that the flooding had begun, and I don't know how long that process takes. In the movie, at the very end of their trip, they're really canoeing through areas that have already been flooded. They're above trees, and I guess they were actually filmed. It was actually filmed in an area that was being dammed up. A lot of the filming took place on the Chattanooga River in Tennessee. The Coahuasi, I think, river is a fictional river, and that's what it's called in both the book and the movie. But those were the big differences. You didn't get the after that you got from the book in the movie, where you see them go to Drew's wife and tell her something happened. They lie to her. You don't see the Ed's wife kind of tend to his injuries, and they do it in the book, but she's completely absent. No, I guess she's there, but you don't learn anything about her in the movie. You don't really see Bobby do anything. Bobby comes across, I think, a little bit better at the end of the movie than he would at the end of the book. But overall, I was surprised at how close the movie was to the book, especially because I didn't remember a lot of the movie and I thought that there was a lot they left out. And it turns out I had just forgotten about those parts and they were included. So it definitely tracked more with the book than I was expecting. And the minor changes they made, I don't think really made too much of a difference. And some of the changes they made were some of the more memorable parts of the movie, especially the dueling banjos. So, all in all, I think they did a great job of adapting the 1970 book into a 1972 movie. All star casting and pretty sweet locations, too. I didn't appreciate the locations the first time I watched it, but I think they did a lot better with that, too. So, if you haven't watched the movie, be prepared for a lot of things that are disturbing. But I don't think it's a horror movie. It's really like a pretty disturbing thriller. And I said this in the review for the book, but the language in the book is just poetic. The way he describes the scenery and the events, just great. I wasn't expecting that. So, and that's partly because I didn't realize that James Dickey had a background in poetry, as well as a fighter pilot in World War II and the Korean War. And he's a star athlete at Clemson and Vanderbilt. So pretty cool. But it took him 8 years to write the book, from 1962, I think, to 1970. And obviously it did not take as long to make the movie, but they did great with both. And while they're both disturbing and talk about a different time and a different part of the United States that most of us probably don't experience, it's a pretty interesting look. So check it out. Thanks for being here today, and I will talk to you later. Enjoy some more of Dueling Banjos at the end of this video. And you are listening to Eric Weisberg on Banjo. Thanks. Bye.